Let me share my story with you. I'm Kara, and for nearly 2 decades, I've been married to Easton. We first crossed paths in college, quickly fell in love, and tied the knot a few years after we graduated. Soon after, we welcomed our son, Austin, into the world. We lived a typical suburban life. Easton was in sales, I managed a local grocery store, and our weekends were filled with Austin's soccer games and family barbecues. One November morning, which started off like any other, took a sudden turn. After dropping Austin off at school, he was a sophomore, already dreaming about college and scholarships. I decided to check our bank accounts before heading to work. We had been diligently saving for Austin's college tuition in a special account, a commitment we both took seriously. Lately, Easton had been secretive, mentioning a major deal he was working on that he claimed would benefit us all. Trusting him, perhaps too much, I logged into our online banking from my car parked outside the grocery store. The shock came swiftly. Our account balance was at zero. Not just low, but completely empty. Panic and confusion overwhelmed me. I called Easton right away, my voice barely a whisper, fearing the worst. "Easton, where's the money for Austin's college fund?" His response was too calm, a tone I knew all too well. One that signaled trouble. "What money?" "Calm down, Kara. There must be a mistake with the bank." I logged in again, hoping for a different outcome, but the result was the same. The money was gone. "No mistake, it's all gone." "What's happening, Easton?" "I don't know, okay? I'll sort it out. Just go to work, and we'll talk later," he said, hanging up before I could protest. Unable to shake off my concerns, I called in sick, turned the car around, and drove straight to the bank. The manager, Marlo, who knew us personally, showed me the transaction records. Her face turned pale as she revealed a series of large transfers from the account over the past few years, all authorized by Easton. Furious and heartbroken, I stormed home to confront him. As soon as he saw me, his face fell. He knew he was caught. "Kara, before you say anything, save it, Easton. For years, you've been taking money from our son," I shouted, my voice loud enough to echo through the house. "No, I was investing it in a business venture, a surprise for us," he tried to explain. "A surprise? You surprised someone with a birthday cake, Easton, not by emptying our son's college fund." Each word I spoke was laden with bitterness. He began to respond, then stopped, seeing the resolve in my eyes. This was serious, and he knew it. "I need to think. I can't even look at you right now," I said, walking away, overwhelmed by betrayal, anger, and the daunting prospect of how we would now afford Austin's education. The following morning, the tension was palpable. Easton and his mother, Barbara, were already in the kitchen when I walked in. "I want every penny returned to Austin's account today," I demanded, my voice firm yet calm. Barbara scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please, Kara. Don't be so dramatic. Easton was just trying to help the family." I turned to her, stunned by her dismissiveness. "Dramatic? How can you say that when our son's future was on the line?" The conversation was far from over, but it was clear it would be a difficult one. "We are discussing the future of our son, Barbara. How can you simply defend him in this situation? Besides, Barbara argued that it's high time Jim learned to be independent. Why should he depend on us to finance his education?" I was stunned by her words. "Are you suggesting that our promise to our son is worthless? That we should just abandon him to manage on his own?" Barbara shook her head dismissively. "You're exaggerating the issue, making a mountain out of a molehill. I won't stand here and be accused of being irrational for caring about our son's future," I retorted, feeling my face flush with frustration. Easton, rubbing his temples in exasperation, intervened. "Kara, let's calm down. We're clearly not going to see eye to eye on this." "No, we're not," I firmly replied, my decision clear. "I want a divorce, Easton." Silence enveloped the room, and even Barbara halted her arguments. "A divorce over this?" "Kara, think it over more carefully," Easton urged, his voice low. "I've never been clearer. You've jeopardized our son's future, and you expect me to accept it? I cannot, and I will not. Moreover, I want the house as compensation for all the money you've squandered. Easton's laugh, harsh and mocking, filled the air. You think you can take everything? I'll contest every claim in court. I felt Barbara's scornful gaze, but disregarded it. Argue all you want, but I'm done here. Come on, Austin, we're leaving, I called out to my son, who had likely heard everything from his room. As Austin and I packed our belongings, Barbara's taunts echoed behind us. You're making a mistake, Kara. You'll regret this. Without looking back, I led Austin out, feeling parts of my past life shedding away, but also a peculiar sense of freedom. Austin and I then drove to my parents' house. Not a week later, Easton and Barbara barged into my parents' home, claiming ownership. In the kitchen with my mom, I heard the front door burst open, and there they stood, Easton smug, Barbara livid. We've hired top lawyers, Kara, Easton declared, as if on the battlefield. They'll prove my mother funded our home. You might want to rethink your demands, unless you want to lose everything. Barbara stepped up, pointing at me aggressively, and forget about the money Easton took. Accept a fair split of the divorce and the house, or we'll ensure you and your son end up with nothing. Facing them, I replied calmly yet firmly, I was the one who made the initial payment for our house. Despite your mother's claims, we both know the truth. Barbara's face reddened even more. Lies. My money purchased that house, and we'll prove it. When we're through, you'll be destitute, she seethed, with Easton supporting her venomous stance. It's time you accepted reality, Kara. You and your son will lose the house, Easton added. At that moment, my mother, who had been quiet, spoke up authoritatively. You have no right to come here and harass my daughter. Leave now. Barbara was far from finished. She sneered and turned her fury towards me again. You think you're clever, don't you? Well, let me tell you, young lady, it's not just about the house. You're going to lose everything because you're so stubborn. That was the moment my father stepped forward, his towering presence overshadowing both Easton and Barbara. I think you've said enough. Both of you, get out of my house now, or I'll throw you out myself, he declared firmly. Easton's confident demeanor waned under my father's stern gaze. Barbara, muttering under her breath, hastily tugged at his arm, urging him to leave. Once they had left, the house returned to silence, save for the pounding of my own heart. My hands trembled, and tears threatened to spill over. Later that evening, after we had cleared the dinner table and were trying to return to some sense of normalcy, Austin, who had been unusually quiet throughout the meal, finally spoke. Mom, I remembered something odd, he started hesitantly. A couple of weeks ago, I saw Dad and Aunt Dahlia at the mall. They were at a jewelry store. My heart sank. Dahlia had been my best friend since high school. What were they doing there? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to hear the answer. They were picking out jewelry. Aunt Dahlia said it was a gift for you, Austin replied, his brow furrowed in confusion. A gift for me? I echoed, a wave of hope and suspicion washing over me. Yeah, but he never gave you any jewelry. That's strange. They seemed very close, and Aunt Dahlia even told me to keep it a surprise, Austin added, clearly disturbed by the memory. My mind raced with questions. Why would Easton buy jewelry with Dahlia and not give it to me? Especially after today's heated confrontation, everything felt more suspect. I need to get to the bottom of this, I murmured, more to myself than anyone else. I'm going to hire a private detective. I need to know what's going on. Determination solidified within me. If Easton was cheating on me with my best friend, I deserved to know the truth. A couple of weeks later, the private detective I hired called me, his tone somber. Mrs. Jones, please come to my office to discuss my findings, he requested. My stomach churned the entire drive there. Upon arrival, he handed me a thick envelope. I'm sorry to say, but the news isn't good, he began, laying out the evidence. He had followed Easton and Dahlia, taking photos and collecting receipts from their excursions, including an expensive necklace that I had never received. Your husband and Mrs. Dahlia have been having an affair. I'm very sorry, he concluded. The drive home was a blur. When I finally arrived at my parents' house, I found them in the living room. I shared everything with them, showing the photos and receipts. The shock on their faces mirrored the hollow feeling inside me. "Oh, Kara, I'm so sorry," my mom said, her voice breaking as she came over to embrace me. "That woman has been in our home, shared our meals. How could she?" I murmured in disbelief, a tear rolling down my cheek. "All these years, she's been lying to me, to all of us." Austin entered the room then, catching the tail end of the conversation. "Mom, are you okay? What happened?" I wiped away my tears and managed a small smile for him, trying to muster the strength to face what would come next. "It's going to be okay, honey," I reassured Austin gently. "We've just uncovered some distressing news about your dad and Dahlia, but we'll get through this together. What matters is that we have each other." That night, as I lay in bed, the sting of betrayal gnawed at me. Easton and Dahlia had lied to me, betrayed my trust, and jeopardized our family's financial security. Yet, amidst the turmoil, I resolved not to be defeated by their deceit. I was determined to stand strong for my son and reclaim the life we deserved. The following morning, fueled by a mix of determination and the need for answers, I called Dahlia and asked her to meet me for a chat. 3 hours later, we sat across from each other at the small cafe where we used to have our friendly catch-ups, the irony of the setting not lost on me. Dahlia seemed unaware of the emotional tempest swirling inside me, smiling casually as she sipped her coffee. "So, how's Austin doing? He must be gearing up for college soon," she asked, her tone light and airy. I fixed a steady gaze on her, my voice taut. "Actually, Austin's not doing well. He's been hurt by his father's affair." Her smile wavered, and she set down her cup, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "Kara, what are you talking about?" "I know about you and Easton, Dahlia," I said calmly but firmly. "I've seen undeniable proof." Her complexion paled, her eyes dropping to the table. "Kara, I can explain," she stammered, her fingers nervously twisting a new ring on her finger. I pointed sharply at her ring. "That ring you're wearing? It was bought with money meant for Austin's education, money that Easton took from our savings." Dahlia's eyes brimmed with tears, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I didn't know, Kara. He told me he was getting a divorce, that it was all but finalized." I scoffed, the mix of anger and betrayal boiling inside me. "And you believed him? After all these years, you just accepted his word without thinking to check with me, without considering Austin?" She wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. "He promised he'd leave the house and everything to you. He said he had enough money to handle it all and wanted to leave with dignity." "That's a lie, Dahlia. He's left us with nothing. Did you know there's another woman, someone from his office? Were you aware of her?" My words were harsh, but necessary. Dahlia shook her head, her expression collapsing into sobs. "No, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Kara. I've been so foolish." For a moment, I simply watched her cry, the years of our friendship wrestling with the fresh, raw wound of her betrayal. Gradually, my anger began to ebb, replaced by a profound weariness. "Look, Dahlia, I don't know if we can ever return to how things were, but I appreciate your honesty now." She took a deep breath and nodded, sliding the ring off her finger and pushing it across the table toward me. "I'll return everything. The jewelry, the car he bought me. It's the least I can do. It won't make up for everything. The money's gone, and Austin's future is uncertain, but it's a start." We sat in silence for a while, the magnitude of the situation weighing heavily on us. Then, Dahlia looked up, her eyes red but determined. "Let me help, Kara. Let's figure this out together. For what it's worth, I want to make things right." We spent the next hour talking, not about the past, but about how to address the immediate challenges and ensure Austin's future. Dahlia's offer to help, though it couldn't undo the past, was a step toward mending the breach and perhaps forging a path forward amidst the wreckage. But it was all about how we could move forward. Dahlia handed me the car keys that Easton had bought for her, along with a bag containing all the jewelry. "I'll do whatever it takes, Kara. I owe you that much," she assured me. The morning after our heart-to-heart, Dahlia called me early, urgency coloring her voice. Kara, you won't believe this. Easton's company is hosting a lavish party tonight for his promotion. It's happening at that upscale venue downtown, and all the top executives will be there. That evening, we arrived at the sleek, modern restaurant, a hub of high spirits and laughter filled with Easton's colleagues. I spotted Easton, the very image of success, laughing and clinking glasses. Seeing him so carefree only fueled my resolve. Dahlia nudged me, whispering, "Ready as I'll ever be." Before I could second-guess myself, I stepped forward. Easton caught sight of me, his smile disappearing and morphing into a scowl. "What the hell are you doing here, Kara? You need to leave," he hissed. His attempt to intimidate me in front of his peers only made me stronger. "Actually, I'm here to congratulate you, Easton. Mind if I borrow the spotlight for a moment?" His confusion was palpable, and he hesitated. Mr. Jackson, his boss, noticing the exchange, gestured for me to continue. "Please, let's hear what Kara has to say." With all eyes on me, I moved towards the front where a projector was set up for presentations. "Thank you, Mr. Jackson," I began, the room quieting as I clicked the remote and images flashed on the screen, photos of Easton and the financial director in compromising positions. The crowd gasped, and whispers filled the air. Not only has Easton been unfaithful to his family, but he's also been embezzling from the company. Here are the financial records to prove it. The next slide showed documents detailing the fraud Easton and his mistress had committed. The room erupted into chaos. Easton tried to protest, his face turning red. "This is nonsense. She's just a scorned woman." But Mr. Jackson, who had been examining the documents closely, silenced him with a raise of his hand. "Enough, Easton. If these documents are real, you've not only betrayed your family, but also this company." He then turned to the financial director, who was now as pale as a ghost. "And you, Jessica, will need to explain a lot. Security, please escort these two out until we sort this out. Consider yourselves suspended, effective immediately." Easton looked as though he'd been slapped. His eyes darted around the room, finding no allies. He glanced at me, fury and disbelief in his eyes, but I wasn't done yet. "I trusted you, Easton. More than that, I loved you. We built a life together, a family, and you threw it all away. I hope it was worth it." With those final words, I walked away, Dahlia at my side, her hand squeezing mine in support. The last thing I heard was Mr. Jackson calling for calm as we exited the building. After Easton and his mistress were fired, they had to return all the stolen money to avoid a lawsuit. A small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Now, I was bracing myself for the biggest fight yet, the divorce and the battle for our house. I sat there with my lawyer, papers neatly stacked in front of us. Across the room, Easton and his lawyer looked less confident than usual. Barbara sat right behind him, her eyes shooting daggers across the room at me as the judge entered. Everyone rose, the room steeped in formality. "Please be seated," the judge commanded, and the session began. My lawyer presented the case succinctly to the judge. We presented undeniable evidence of Mr. Jones's infidelities and the misappropriation of our shared finances. The courtroom reviewed bank records, photographs, and witness testimonies that illustrated how Mr. Jones had diverted our family funds to sustain his extramarital activities. As each piece of evidence was unveiled, Easton's complexion turned a ghostly white. Then it was Barbara's turn to speak. She stood, her voice quivering with anger. "Your Honor, these accusations are fabrications. My son is a decent man pushed to the brink by Kara. Moreover, the house they resided in was purchased with my finances." Her voice pierced the silent courtroom, sounding both shrill and desperate. I held back, my fists clenched under the table to maintain my composure. "Mrs. Jones, can you substantiate your claims regarding the house?" the judge asked, his tone marked by skepticism. "I don't have the papers here, but it's true," she faltered. At that moment, my lawyer approached the bench, presenting a stack of documents to the judge. "Your Honor, these are the bank statements and mortgage records clearly indicating that Kara made the initial down payment and all subsequent mortgage payments from her personal account. The judge nodded, meticulously examining the documents. Easton whispered frantically to his lawyer, a visible air of defeat enveloping him. Suddenly, Barbara, unable to restrain herself, stood up and blurted out, "This is all your fault, Kara. If you had been a better wife, my son wouldn't have strayed to other women." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the judge struck his gavel for order. "Mrs. Jones, another outburst like that, and I will have you removed from this courtroom," he warned sternly. Barbara slumped back into her seat, muttering to herself. After careful deliberation, the judge finally announced, having reviewed all the evidence, "It is clear that Mr. Jones has not only been unfaithful, but has also grossly mismanaged marital assets. The court rules in favor of Mrs. Jones. The house shall remain under her ownership. Mr. Jones is ordered to return 70% of the misused funds, along with additional compensation for emotional distress awarded to Mrs. Jones." Easton appeared as if he had been struck, his head hanging low in defeat. Outside the courtroom, I took a deep breath, savoring the freedom from the web of lies and deceit that had shadowed our lives. Austin had witnessed everything, the disgraceful actions of his father and grandmother leaving a profound impact on him. Later that evening, Austin approached me, a serious look in his eyes. "Mom, I can't see Dad anymore, not after everything. And I don't think I want to talk to Grandma Barbara either," he declared, his voice steady yet tinged with pain. I pulled him into a comforting embrace, my heart heavy for him. "It's okay, Austin. You do what feels right for you. I'm here, no matter what." In the weeks that followed, staying in the house that once symbolized our family's unity felt increasingly untenable. I decided to sell it, offering Austin and myself a chance for a genuine fresh start. We moved to a smaller, cozier place closer to the college Austin hoped to attend, a new beginning within reach of his promising future. As for Easton, his downfall was swift and severe. His career crumbled, and his reputation was left in tatters. The last I heard, he was still grappling with the consequences of his actions. Easton was now making ends meet by taking on odd jobs and depending on his mother's pension, especially after the substantial amount he had to repay us. One evening, while Austin and I were setting up our new living room, he paused from arranging his books and looked at me thoughtfully. "Mom, do you ever feel bad for Dad?" His question was simple, but laden with complex emotions. I stopped what I was doing and chose my words with care. "Austin, I feel sad about how everything turned out, but feeling bad for him. He made his choices, honey. We all have to live with the consequences of our actions. What's important is that we learn from them and aim to be better." Austin nodded, his brow furrowed in thought. "I want to be nothing like him, Mom. And you won't be," I reassured him, tousling his hair affectionately. "You're your own person, and you have your own choices to make." I was proud of the young man he was becoming. Life gradually settled into a new rhythm for us. Our days were filled with work, school, and cozy movie nights in our snug living room. I continued working at the grocery store, finding comfort in the routine as it anchored me through the transition. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, our new home began to feel like a part of us, much like the garden we nurtured together, slowly, with care and a lot of love. One evening, as I sat reflecting over a cup of tea, I realized that despite the trials, the heartaches, and the upheaval, we had emerged stronger. I had fought for my son's future and my peace of mind, and we had triumphed.
Audrey is my name. I've been married for a little over a year. I've been working hard to win the approval of my mother-in-law, but it appears that everything was for naught. The reason for this is straightforward. My mother-in-law approached me and said something like this. "I'm giving you back," she said. "What, return?" I asked, perplexed. Needless to say, I was taken aback, but it didn't matter how hard I tried. My mother-in-law drove me to my parents' house. My parents lived near my in-laws, only a few minutes away by car. When we arrived at my parents' house, my mother-in-law shouted loudly out the door, "Hey, come on out!" Inside the house, there was a thumping sound. My father came out right away. "Oh, can I assist you?" he asked. "I'm sorry, but I have to speak with you," my mother-in-law replied. "A talk? Let's hear it inside. Come on in," my father responded with a smile. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, shook her head. "We can talk here. We're only here to give your useless daughter back," she told him. "Useless daughter?" My father's expression shifted, his gaze clearly upset, as it turned to my mother-in-law. "What do you mean, useless?" he wondered. "I mean exactly what I said. Isn't that right?" she continued. My mother-in-law expected my father to understand her. "Don't you understand unless I tell you? A wife with a monthly salary of only $500 is a faulty product. Defective," she insisted. "Defective?" My father's face looked like that of a demon. I was afraid my father would go insane, but there was nothing I could do. My mother-in-law, oblivious to my father's rage, continued to speak ill of me as if nothing was wrong. "You know what? She can't do a thing around the house, and she doesn't make much money," she kept accusing me. "And now you want to return her?" my father inquired, his voice tense. When my mother noticed the commotion, she came out of the house. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, didn't look at my mother. "That's what I said," she told my father. "I'm returning such a wife, so the parents should accept responsibility," the mother-in-law added. "I see. I understand what you mean," my father replied. He took one look at my mother, then they both nodded. "Well then, there's nothing we can do. Let us take responsibility and close the company," my father uttered. "Yes, we need to accept responsibility and close the company," my mother added firmly. "What? You're going to close the business?" My mother-in-law was taken aback. "Wait, what company are you referring to?" my father-in-law asked, a little upset. "You're asking us to take responsibility. It's company. What else could it be?" my father stated flatly. I couldn't help but sigh when I saw my father in that state. He was furious. What should I do? I couldn't stop him when he became like this. My father, when serious, would always follow through on his promises. No matter how difficult the task, he would make whatever he said come true, particularly when it came to me, because he adores me so much. Why is my father so devoted to me? It has something to do with my childhood. From a young age, I was extremely frail. If something bad happened to me, I'd get a fever and go to bed right away. Every few weeks, I'd get a fever, and I'd stay in bed for a week after falling ill. That is why I couldn't attend elementary school much and rarely played with my friends. My mother would, of course, stay with me if I fell ill, and because he was worried about me, my father was unable to complete any work, which was a common occurrence in our family. Perhaps he loved me even more than usual because I was so frail. In any case, both of my parents adored me since I was a child. Being physically weak wasn't all bad either. My parents provided me with many things to keep me occupied while I was bedridden. They bought me books, video games, and a variety of other items. My older brother was extremely jealous of me. I was the only one who could be bought so many things. Among them, I was particularly fond of my laptop. It was my father's, which he used for work. Because it was my father's second-hand laptop, it might not have been enough for a normal person to use. However, as an elementary school student, it was enough. I was able to draw pictures and play games. I could use it to connect to the internet and see what was going on in the world. I spent most of my time in bed, so the computer was a whole new world to me. There was a world here that I had no idea existed. Perhaps I can make my own world here. It's a good memory that I had as a child. That is how I became interested in computers. It started with children's drawings, but I eventually moved on to computer graphics. Fascinated by the world of 3D, I began to study illustration and computer graphics. That's how I ended up becoming a graphic designer. Even though I'm weak, I can handle this. With this in mind, after graduating from high school, I began working as a graphic designer at home. However, I encountered numerous difficulties in the beginning. I was self-taught, and I lacked any specialized knowledge. Furthermore, I had no idea how to find work. My body isn't in good enough shape to go to work, so I'll just have to make do. It is difficult for me to commute to work. I could work remotely, but I wouldn't be able to work every day like a regular person. In other words, the only way for me to work at my own pace is to take on work on my own and complete it. It's a lot of work, but if this works out, I'll be able to support myself. I spent many days on the internet researching, piling hard work on top of hard work. I persisted, and more people began to recognize me. The same people approached me again or introduced me to new clients. My work gradually began to take on the characteristics of a job. In the meantime, 5 years had passed. When my work became popular, I breathed a sigh of relief. My father approached me with a proposal at that point. "Do you want to make a commercial for a construction company?" he asked. It was an unexpected request. My father owns and operates a local construction company. He used to build houses on contract, but now remodeling houses is his main source of income. There were only 3 employees, my father, mother, and brother, but it was a well-known construction company in the neighborhood. "Are you sure you want me to do this? If it were a job, I'd be paid, right?" I asked, wanting to be clear. "I didn't request it because you're my daughter. I'm asking because I believe you have good advertising tastes," my father replied. I thanked my father for his words of wisdom. I was pleased to be recognized as having good taste, but more than anything, I felt accepted. My design was later used as an insert ad in the newspaper. I also made a website for the construction company and posted the ad on it. Of course, because we were a local company, we are not well known on a national scale. Locals would approach me and say, "I saw your ad," and some would even say, "It's good." I couldn't stop smiling because such voices made me so happy. At the same time, my ad was turned into a poster. The posters were displayed at the company's entrance and on bulletin boards maintained by the local community association. I can stand on my own feet. I can live independently, I thought to myself, overjoyed to have such a sense of accomplishment. Meanwhile, my posters were becoming the talk of the town. The daughter of the construction company is a designer. She also creates advertisements for the building company. Such rumors began to circulate in the community. As a result, the locals began to approach me for assistance. Then someone came to see me one day. It was an electrician from the town. "Your daughter is a designer. Can you create our advertisements?" he asked my father. "I'll ask Audrey about it," my father said lightheartedly. Actually, the electrician in town is one of our clients. Although it is called the town electrician, in reality, it is an electrical construction company. For example, they install air conditioners, fiber optic lines, and electrical wiring. So when electrical work is needed for remodeling, we ask the town electrician to do it. "So, Audrey, can you do it for me?" my dad asked, turning to me. I understood they were an important business partner, so I accepted the offer. Sometime later, I asked my father to deliver the finished advertisement. It turned out to be even better than I had expected, and the electrician in town was quite pleased. In addition to the mission, he even came to my house to thank me with a gift wrapped in a sweet envelope. "I just wanted to thank you for the wonderful job you did," he said. But it wasn't the electrician I knew well. It was a young man who bowed in gratitude. "Who are you?" I asked. "Oh, my name is Jeremiah. My father is the electrician." It was Jeremiah, the electrician's son, who came to greet me. He was a college graduate and was currently helping out as an electrician. "So, you will eventually become an electrician?" I asked. "Eventually I plan to take over the business," Jeremiah replied. "Then we might be friends for a long time," I said. "Yes, I would like that as well, especially with an attractive person like you," he added with a smile. "What? Me?" I was surprised. I had not been able to attend school much and had never been in a relationship. Could it be that I was being seduced? My face suddenly lit up when I thought that. I turned bright red and slumped down like a child. In the end, We only exchanged contact information that day, but it wasn't business contact information. It was our personal details. I had never done anything like this before. I was so nervous that I couldn't sleep that night. After that, Jeremiah and I kept in touch with each other. In between work, we would tell each other about the day's events and talk about hobbies, favorite things, and other interests. It became a daily routine. Eventually, we started dating. However, we could not do any of the things that normal couples do. First of all, I was too frail to travel far on dates. We could only go out together to a neighborhood park when I was feeling well. We were never able to go on a normal date like watching a movie. Another major reason was that our days off did not match. Because I was taking on work privately, I was able to take time off freely, but that was not the case with Jeremiah. Even on days off, he often received urgent requests to repair household appliances. Moreover, as summer and winter approached, it was not unusual for him to have to install air conditioners every day. Despite all this, I couldn't do anything that was typical of a normal lover, but that didn't cause me any trouble. We could always keep in touch with each other on our phones, exchange words, and send messages. I was always in bed with a fever, so that was nothing to me. We grew our love in this way and got married a few years later. I was to go to Jeremiah's house. Naturally, Jeremiah's parents knew me well, so my mother-in-law told me, "Just take care of the housework, as long as it's not too much for you." "I understand," I said. My father-in-law was also kind to me. "When you have time, will you make the traditional pop-ups for me?" he asked me. "I'll take care of it," I replied. "I'll leave it to you." "Thank you," he said. I thought I was getting along with my in-laws because of this, but that was only in the beginning. Gradually, my mother-in-law began to ask me to take care of various things. "I'm going to be out of town for a while, so can you watch the store for me?" she asked. "Sure, but I'm working too," I said. "Just stay at the counter. You can work there too, right?" she suggested. "If you don't mind if I bring my laptop, I'll take care of it," I responded. "I don't mind at all," my mother-in-law agreed. In this way, my mother-in-law began to ask me to watch the store more and more often. My father-in-law also started asking me for favors. "Could you make a website for the store?" he inquired. "What?" "I'm not an expert," I replied. "Just something simple, okay? Please," he added. Creating a website is not my specialty, but my father-in-law pushed me into creating a website for the electronics company. After that, my in-laws would ask me to do something for them at every opportunity. One after another, they would ask me to do this, that, and the other. Eventually, my mother-in-law said to me, "I'm sorry, but could you do the cleaning for me?" she stated. "What? I have work to do too," I retorted. "What are you talking about? You're the wife. Can't you at least do that?" she insisted. Yes, I replied. In the end, I was forced to do the cleaning. Once I took on the job, there was no backing down. After cleaning, there was cooking, then laundry, and gradually the amount of housework increased. I was also made to take care of the store. I couldn't do my own work. I had no choice but to cut back on all my work as a graphic designer. Naturally, my income decreased, but I was already married, and Jeremiah was paying for my living expenses. So I was not that worried. But that was not the problem. "I think I have a fever today," I said. I was so tired that I finally caught a fever. I told my mother-in-law, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to rest for a while." When I told her, she wasn't happy. "I can't believe you'd get a fever over something like that," she said. But then she added, "Oh yes, I understand. Just go back to bed." She said this casually and quickly left the room. Huh? I might have offended her, I thought, regretting it. But it was true that my body wasn't listening to me, so there was nothing I could do about it. I lay down on the bed. After a while, Jeremiah came in and asked, "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm sorry," I replied. "Don't be too hard on yourself," he continued. "I know, but your parents," I replied. I told Jeremiah that I had no choice because my in-laws had forced me to do the chores. Then Jeremiah looked at me suspiciously. "Why don't you just say no?" he uttered. "But," I began. "What are you talking about? You're an adult. You should at least express your opinion," he interrupted me. Jeremiah did not understand anything. If this were a proper job, I would definitely say no, but the other party was my in-laws. If I rejected my mother-in-law, it might cause problems later on. It was the same with my father-in-law. If I complained and my father-in-law hated me, he might say, "Get a divorce." I know it's probably just me thinking too much, but I can't help but think about it. This is why I could not disobey my in-laws. Aside from that, I was sad that Jeremiah didn't understand me. I couldn't believe he didn't understand me either. I was all alone in my in-laws' house. Thinking of that, I started crying. However, this kind of thing was quite common. I mustn't lose, I told myself. After that, when the fever subsided, my mother-in-law again asked me to run errands for her. I reduced my own workload and complied with her request as much as I could. In this way, I tried to get in the favor of my parents-in-law. One day, after all this had happened, my mother-in-law suddenly asked me something like this. "Audrey, how is your work going?" "Well, I'm continuing little by little, yes," I replied. "How much money do you earn now?" she continued. "Huh? That's none of your business, is it?" I answered sharply. "It does matter. Prices have been going up lately, and if you could just give me some money for living expenses," she said, grinning. As far as I could see, the electrician's business had not gone away. Rather, as prices have risen, more and more people were looking for energy-efficient home appliances. Thanks to this, jobs such as air conditioner installation were even increasing. We were sometimes asked by major electronics retailers to provide support, and if anything, their income should be increasing. That's what I thought. However, my mother-in-law hinted that she did not have enough money to make ends meet. Feeling a little strange, I told her a smaller amount. My income is also tight. I also have housework, so right now my monthly income is about $500, I said. "What? 500? She wondered. "Yes, 500 a month is not so bad if you think of it as a part-time job," I repeated. My mother-in-law suddenly turned red. "Only $500? And you don't even do much housework," she uttered indignantly. "I think I do a fair amount of housework." Her accusations were unfounded. "I do all the cooking and cleaning these days. I even take care of the store and do the laundry when my mother-in-law is not around." As I was thinking about this, my mother-in-law said to me, "Wait a minute, I'll go talk to your father," and ran to my father-in-law. A few minutes later, my mother-in-law came back with my father-in-law and said to me, "Come with me." I questioned, "What? Where?" "Your parents' house," she replied. "My house?" I marveled. "I'm returning you," my mother-in-law said. After that, I was forcibly taken to my parents' house, where I was told in front of my father that I would be returned. In response, my father just said, "I'm going to close my own company." As I was dreading what to do, my mother-in-law smiled and said, "You want to close your company? Do you mean your construction company? Is that what you're talking about?" She was trying to make it clear. "Yes, there is no other company for me," my father responded with a thin smile. My father-in-law sighed and added, "You're going to destroy the construction company and eliminate our electrician's business, aren't you?" "If that's the case, what then?" Dad replied. "I'm sorry, but we have other clients besides you," my father-in-law continued. "There are tons of electrician jobs out there," he added. "Then it's okay for me to take responsibility for my daughter and shut down my own construction company, isn't it?" my father asked, looking directly at my father-in-law. "Suit yourself," my father-in-law retorted. "It's no use trying to coerce me into collapsing together." In the end, he yelled these final words and left. My mother-in-law turned to me and sneered, "You useless wife, you don't have to come back." I was left in a daze. "Is everything all right, Audrey?" my father asked, concerned. "What should I do, Dad?" I asked, feeling lost. "He said so many hurtful things. Wouldn't it be better to get a divorce?" my dad uttered. "Yeah, I guess so," I replied reluctantly. However, Jeremiah might come for me, I thought, clinging to hope. The most important thing is for Jeremiah to love me, even if my in-laws don't. But Jeremiah did not come for me, no matter how long I waited. After a few days, I finally received a message from Jeremiah with only 3 words. "Let's get divorced." I wasn't convinced. I kept sending messages to Jeremiah, but he never responded. Then Jeremiah's lawyer called me. "Jeremiah's parents have persuaded him to divorce you," he informed me. I could not say anything. I agreed to the divorce, accepting the alimony and other conditions that Jeremiah offered. Thus, my marriage, which lasted less than a year, came to an end. At the same time, my father's construction company also closed its doors. However, it did not stop completely. In fact, my brother took over my father's construction company. The location and name of the company remained the same, but he cut ties with Jeremiah's family business. Naturally, this hit Jeremiah's family's business hard. Still, they had other clients and managed somehow. But they weren't safe, especially since my return became a big rumor around town. Gradually, Jeremiah's family began to be avoided, and more requests were made to the electrician's company that my brother had partnered with. This continued, and finally, rumors spread that Jeremiah's business was going under. "This will teach him a lesson," my father said one day, satisfied. My mother and I thought so too, but then the wind suddenly changed. It was the summer of the following year. I was in my brother's construction company office when we received a phone call. "Excuse me, the air conditioner seems to have broken down," said someone whose house my brother had remodeled. When my brother went to check on it, he found that the outdoor unit of the air conditioner had been broken. "That's terrible, even for a prank," my brother muttered. He consulted with the family and immediately reported it to the police. My brother then contacted his electrician partner and had the air conditioner replaced. But this wasn't the only case. The same thing happened again and again. My brother's construction company alone could not handle the situation. The story goes that the affected people reluctantly asked Jeremiah's family for help. "We are receiving more and more similar requests, and the fee will be charged at a premium," my ex-father-in-law announced, grinning. "Is that okay with you?" he asked one of the affected clients. "The number of people in need is increasing," he added, justifying the premium charge. It was unacceptable to charge more for repairs just because demand was rising. I was furious, but it had nothing to do with me. There was nothing I could do but give up. But my brother was different. "I'll find the culprit," he declared, and asked for the cooperation of several of his clients. I wondered what he was going to do, but what he did was very simple. He lent them an intercom for free. "Why an intercom?" I asked, puzzled. Intercoms nowadays have a video recording function. Some have sensors, so they can be used in place of security cameras, he explained. "I don't think it will be that easy," I said skeptically. But within 3 days, the culprits were caught. Moreover, it was Jeremiah's parents who were caught. They had broken into houses in the middle of the night and destroyed the air conditioners, creating work for themselves because they had lost clients. When questioned by the police, they confessed to such selfish motives. I was reminded of the term mutual collapse. If my father quit the construction business, Jeremiah's business would be in jeopardy. Perhaps my ex-father-in-law knew this and used the term deliberately. At any rate, the arrest of my in-laws triggered the collapse of Jeremiah's family's electronics shop. Apparently, Jeremiah has now started working at a demolition job site to pay for the damage. One of the electricians who worked at my brother's construction company told me he saw him there, but I don't care. I sympathize with him, but I don't want to get involved anymore. Besides, I'm happy now. I work as a graphic designer and also look after the store at my brother's construction company. I can work at my own pace, and best of all, I don't have nagging in-laws. There is one problem though. My father is retired. He keeps asking, "Are you tired? Are you okay?" He's always around talking to me. "If you're so bored, why don't you get a job too?" "I think it's cooler to have a working dad," I teased. As soon as I said that, my father started working again at my brother's construction company. It seems that my father loves me after all, but I love my father too, so we are even. Make-ahead dishes are not something to feed your husband. Poor Easton is still growing. This is why women raised in single-parent households are like this, lazy and neglectful. My mother-in-law sneered as I was busy caring for my own mother. "My mother is right," my husband added in a weary tone. "You haven't even sent my shirt to the cleaners, and you're neglecting your housework." I replied with a trembling voice, "I can't just leave my mother alone when she needs care. There's no one else but me who can take care of her." My husband laughed bitterly. "Just leave the dying old woman alone," he uttered. I was so angry that I snapped back, "How could you say such a terrible thing? We're family. We need to help each other, and you should help with the housework too." My mother-in-law looked down on me with disdain. "Help each other? Even if we had something to help with, there's no way we'd ask a single mother like your mother for anything," she stated. I was filled with anger at her words. She had been making me do all sorts of things, treating my mother like a single mother, and making fun of me. Now she was saying such terrible things. I'll never forgive my husband or my mother-in-law. I'll make sure they regret it. My name is Diane. I'm 37 years old and have been married to Miles, who is 3 years older than me and works as a company employee for 15 years. My husband is in sales for a trading partner, and we met through work. We've both been working for the same company since we got married. My father died early, and I was raised by a single mother, so when my husband proposed to me, I was happy to think that we could build a warm home together. My mother, who raised me, was also happy about my marriage to Miles, and we soon had our son, Easton. Easton is already in his second year of junior high school. If you ask if he's living happily, he's not. I have a big worry. At the end of one day's work, my mother-in-law called me. I couldn't ignore it, even though I thought it was going to be something again. "Hello, what's wrong with you?" I answered, already dreading what she wanted. "Oh, Diane, can you go shopping for me right now?" she demanded. "I just finished work, and I have something to do after this," I explained, hoping she would understand. "Just do it. Go buy 5 sets of Godiva chocolates." "Got it," she ordered. "Huh? Wait, mother-in-law." But the phone was already hung up. I sighed. Actually, this wasn't unusual. My mother-in-law always gave me errands to run, and if I couldn't do them perfectly, she would make sarcastic comments. This time, too, I had no choice but to listen to her and buy the 5 sets of Godiva chocolates and head towards their house. My unfriendly mother-in-law opened the door and rustled through the shopping bag. "Oh, this isn't what I asked for. I wanted the seasonal set," she said, looking at what I had bought her with exaggerated disappointment. "No, it's 5 sets of Godiva chocolates just like you asked," I said in confusion. "What are you talking about? I clearly said seasonal set. You bought something different, so I won't pay," she retorted. "That's troubling. You have to pay for it. It costs $30, I insisted. "Oh no, you're greedy for money too. That's why people who grow up in single-parent households become so greedy." "Right, hubby?" she called out to my father-in-law. My father-in-law, who had been spoken to by my mother-in-law, glanced at me without looking up from his newspaper and said only, "Oh." I bit my tongue in frustration. My father-in-law runs his own business, and my mother-in-law is a housewife. They should have been quite wealthy financially, but they always make me bring them things and then complain about them or refuse to pay for them. My mother-in-law always belittles me with glee, and my father-in-law is indifferent to it. It's always the same, but when it's repeated like this, it's hard to feel good. "Well, excuse me," I muttered as I left my in-laws' house in tears, with my mother-in-law eating yoken with satisfaction behind me. Then I hurriedly headed to the hospital. When I opened the door to the hospital room, I saw Easton's back in his school uniform. "Easton, you came. How are you feeling, Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Easton and Mom greeted me with a smile. "Good job, Mom," Easton said, his voice full of warmth. "Diane, thank you for coming today. You worked hard," my mother added gently. My mother had a mild stroke and was hospitalized. My kind mother raised me on her own while working as a caregiver after my father died. "Diane, are you doing well with Miles? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry," I lied. I didn't want to worry my mother, who always wished for my happiness first and foremost. So I couldn't tell her what was happening at my in-laws' house. After talking to my mother, who was lying in bed for a while, and taking care of her change of clothes, I left the hospital with Easton. In the car on the way back home, I talked to Easton. He tells me about school and friends little by little. He's been a little cheeky lately because he's in puberty, but he's basically a good kid. "Easton, thank you for always visiting Grandma," I thanked him. "It's okay. I like Grandma on your side because she's kind. But no, it's nothing," he replied. We had such a conversation and returned home. My husband had already finished work and was leaning back on the sofa watching TV. "I'm home. Sorry it took so long," I said, hoping for a small reprieve. "Hey, where's my food?" he snapped. "It's not ready yet. I was asked to do something by your mother after work," I explained. "Shut up. Stop making excuses and make it quickly," he uttered angrily. My husband didn't listen to me and shouted at me. While feeling dissatisfied with him for not listening to me either, I started doing housework anyway. I can work hard because of my mother and Easton. I felt it when I was working with my hands. One day, while living such days, I received a call from the hospital. My mother's stroke had recurred. We immediately had surgery, but the results were not good, and she was left with severe disabilities. My mother could no longer move her body or speak, and so began my life as a caregiver. I visited my mother before or after work and took care of her daily needs with all my might. I told the company about my situation, and they were flexible with me. But there were times when household chores became neglected, so my husband started complaining more often. One day, when I returned home tired from the hospital, my mother-in-law had come to visit without notice. My husband was already home too. "Oh, welcome back, Mrs." My mother-in-law greeted me with thinly veiled sarcasm. "I'm sorry. I went to see my mother at the hospital." "Mother-in-law, why did you come today?" I asked, weary of what was to come. Another visit," she said dismissively. "Miles said there was no dinner, so I bought some side dishes," his mother added. My husband ate the side dishes that my mother-in-law had apparently bought for him, looking unhappy. "What? I said this morning that I put it in the refrigerator, wrapped up," I reminded my husband. Make-ahead dishes are not something to feed your husband. Poor Easton is still growing. This is why women raised in single-parent households are like this, lazy and neglectful, my mother-in-law smirked. "My mother is right. You haven't even sent my shirt to the cleaners, and you're neglecting your housework," he entered the conversation. I replied with a trembling voice, "I can't just leave my mother alone when she needs care. There's no one else but me who can take care of her." Then my husband laughed coldly. "Just leave the dying old woman alone," he uttered. I was so angry that I snapped back, "How could you say such a terrible thing? We're family. We need to help each other, and you should help with the housework too," I objected. My mother-in-law looked down on me and said, "Help each other? Even if we had something to help with, there's no way we'd ask a single mother like your mother for anything." I was filled with anger at her words. "Shut up and do the housework. If something like this happens again, I won't forgive you," my husband threatened. Although I wanted to shout at his words, I couldn't be assertive. When I thought of my mother and Easton, I didn't want to worry my mother in her sick bed, and for Easton's sake, I didn't want to get a divorce. In front of my grinning husband and mother-in-law, I had no choice but to swallow my anger. A week later, my mother's stroke recurred. We did everything we could, but it was not enough. My mother finally passed away. I clung to her and cried, and Easton cried with me. To my one and only mother, the mother who always thought about me and Easton until the very end. She is no longer with us. Memories with her flooded back, and the tears wouldn't stop. But still, there were things that had to be done. As the chief mourner, I held a funeral for her. It was a small ceremony, but people from her work also came to pay their respects, and I think it was a warm funeral. However, towards the end of the funeral, I noticed something. My husband looked bored in the funeral hall, so I approached him. "Hey, aren't your parents coming?" I asked. "Oh, I told them, but they said they wouldn't come," he replied casually, surprising me. "What do you mean?" I asked, confused. "There's no need for Dad and Mom to come to a stranger's funeral," he said with a laugh that made me feel uneasy. Then he added, "By the way, is it true that you're inheriting $1.5 million? I heard from relatives." It was true. My mother inherited a lot of assets when my father died. She worked hard so that I wouldn't be in need, so almost all of my father's inheritance was left untouched for me. Even after taxes were deducted, it exceeded $1.5 million. I was furious at my husband, who not only used me but also brought up the inheritance right after the funeral of my mother, whom he didn't even mourn for. He insulted single mothers like my mom, who was poor, and called her offensive names even after her death. I will make sure he regrets it. As I tried to sort out my emotions, mixed with sadness for losing my mother and anger towards my husband, someone put their hand on my shoulder in the waiting room. I turned around in surprise to see Easton, tears in his eyes. He looked straight at me and said, "Mom, you don't have to work hard anymore. Let's run away together." I hugged Easton silently and cried. "Thank you, Easton. Thank you," I responded. Easton had been watching over me all along and stayed by my side. I had thought that I shouldn't get a divorce for Easton's sake too, but Easton melted away my hardened feelings. Encouraged by him, I packed up that day and moved with him to the house where my mother had lived. There were calls from my husband and mother-in-law immediately after that, but I ignored them all. About 3 months later, after the memorial service for my mother had settled down, on a day off while spending time leisurely with Easton at home, the intercom at the entrance rang. When I peeked out, it was my husband, whom I hadn't seen since the funeral, standing there. I opened the door and glared at him. "What do you want now?" I demanded. "Oh, Diane, it's been a while. I've been lonely. Easton is here too, right?" My husband spoke in a cajoling voice while grinning like a cat. I felt goosebumps. "What do you want? Tell me," I asked again. "I just wanted to see you guys. We're family, aren't we?" he continued. "Huh? What is that? What is your real purpose?" I asked, keeping a straight face. My husband stopped laughing and spoke more seriously. "Diane, actually, Mom has been diagnosed with cancer and is hospitalized now," he concluded. "Oh, really?" I answered, making him flustered. "Medical insurance wasn't taken out, so there's not enough money for medical expenses. You received an inheritance from your mother-in-law, right? $100,000. No, even $500,000 is fine. Please lend me the money," he pleaded, putting his hands together in front of his face and looking up at me. "Why? Your family is wealthier than mine, so you don't need to borrow money," I replied. "That's because my father made a debt in his business. Now he's being chased by repayments, and he can't do anything about it. Hey, we're family, right? Help me out," he answered, looking away awkwardly. Why should I? The dying old hag can be left alone," I retorted. My husband's expression changed for a moment, but then he became furious, like a raging fire. "What the hell are you? How could you say something so heartless, you demon wife?" he exclaimed indignantly. "I just said what was said to my mother. Do you have a problem with that? I responded calmly and continued. I won't be returning to the family anymore. His anger grew. To the family? No, to the husband. What kind of language is that? Remember that, he shouted. To the husband? What are you talking about? We're not a family anymore, I said coldly. What? My husband looked confused, and I handed him the divorce papers I had already filled out. It saved me the trouble of having you come over. Sign this right away, I suggested. What? What is this? Divorce? Are you serious? He stared at the divorce papers, his face like that of a pigeon that had eaten a bean bullet. Of course, I'm serious. I'll claim not only Easton's child support, but also compensation for years of mental anguish. The lawyer has already been decided, I continued firmly. A lawyer? Are you serious? Do you want to raise Easton as a single mother? He turned red in the face and shouted. Easton appeared from inside the house, and when my husband saw him, he changed his tone. Oh, Easton, your mother said she wants to divorce your father. You don't want to become a single-parent family, do you? You don't want to be separated from your father and grandmother, he asked his son. Easton gave him a cold stare and asked, Did Dad ever do anything like a father should do for me? Huh? My husband, sounding dumbfounded, listened as Easton continued quietly. Even when Dad was at home, he made Mom work hard and insulted her. And Dad's grandmother only talked bad about Mom and her deceased grandmother to me. Dad, I can't consider you and Grandma my family. What does it matter if we're a single-parent family as long as I have Mom? Easton concluded. When Easton said that clearly, my husband's anger turned toward him. What did you say? Have you forgotten the favor I did for raising you? Miles was perplexed. Easton stood firm. I don't feel any gratitude at all. Even if it goes to divorce mediation, I'll testify about what Dad and Grandma did to me, he added. You, what a thing to say to your father. My husband tried to approach Easton in anger, but I stepped between them, protecting my son. Easton has always been by my side and supported me. With such a reliable son by my side, we won't lose even if it goes to court, I stated. My husband stepped back from my commanding tone. I took a deep breath and continued. Please contact us through our lawyer from now on. Don't come near us anymore. I pushed the lawyer's business card into my stunned husband's hand and closed the door with a snap. My husband made noise outside, saying, Open up, and please, for a while. But I ignored him until he eventually became quiet and left, sulking. After he was gone, I said, Thank you to Easton, who smiled and said, It's okay, Mom. Let's work hard together from now on. I nodded and held his hand on my shoulder. After that, my husband and mother-in-law called me many times, but as I ignored them, the contact gradually decreased. 3 months later, according to rumors I heard, my husband borrowed money from relatives and paid for his mother-in-law's medical expenses. Thanks to that, her illness was cured, but now they are working hard together with all their relatives to repay their debts. My mother-in-law, who had never worked before, and my father-in-law, who had only pretended to be an entrepreneur, are both working at the factory together. My husband also works as a road construction worker at night, because his earnings so far have not been enough. As for Easton and me, we sold our house so that my husband or his parents wouldn't come near us anymore, and moved into a new apartment. A new life began, and Easton helped me with housework, etc., supporting me. From now on, I will live my life with the goal of making Easton happy, like my deceased mother. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel.